Mandatory hotel quarantine for all arrivals from red list countries comes into force in the UK from today. Passengers from 33 countries, including Portugal, the countries deemed high risk for coronavirus variants, have to pre-book and pay €2,000 to self-isolate for 10 days in government-sanctioned accommodation. Those who fail to quarantine in such hotels face fines of up to €11,500. Well, we can go to London's Heathrow Airport now to speak to our correspondent who's there for us, Tig Enright. Sorry, who's at one of the hotels that people will be going to once they've arrived in the country. So, Tig, talk us through the process. If I arrived this morning, suitcase in tow, I'm not going home, I might be going to one of the places just behind you.
Yeah, that's right. I'm outside the Renaissance Hotel here at Heathrow Airport. It actually overlooks the runway, so we're right next to the airport. And as you say, if you are coming from one of those red list countries and you are a UK or an Irish resident, all other travellers are banned. If you are a UK or Irish resident, you'll have to spend 10 nights here. As you say, you should have booked on a special government website ahead of your arrival, although there have been some problems with that website crashing. And then once you're off the plane, you're supposed to tell border officials. Now, there is clearly an element of voluntary compliance there, although, as you mentioned, very tough penalties, even up to 10 years in prison, threatened against those found to have lied about where they've come from. There's criticism too about the fact that once you get off the plane and before you reach the border, there's nothing to separate incoming travellers from these countries from other passengers, so you could be mixing and be at risk of spreading on the virus to them. But this is one of a total of 16 hotels, 16, that have been arranged by the government, a total of 5,000, almost 5,000 rooms, although we're told that a further 58,000 rooms are on standby. You'll have to pay around €2,000 for 10 nights accommodation here. You'll get all your meals provided to your room, and there'll be security everywhere as well. Amenities obviously very limited, although in this hotel, for example, they say they're providing board games in the rooms to the quarantiners. The health secretary describing it as another layer of security, but as I've been saying, lots of questions about just how secure that extra layer really is.
Tig, thank you very much. I'm thinking what board games you can play just by yourself, but there we go. Tig there for us outside one of those hotels at Heathrow Airport. Australia introduced a mandatory hotel quarantine for all arrivals last year. Melbourne, though, has once again gone into quarantine after the British variant was identified there. Well, joining us now is Professor Nancy Baxter, head of the Melbourne School of Population and Global Health at the University of Melbourne. Thank you very much for speaking to us again on the programme. Look, Melbourne have identified this UK variant, and also Auckland in New Zealand have done as well. You would think the purpose of these mandatory hotel quarantines would be to stop that happening. Are there any theories about how the UK variant has got to both Australia and New Zealand?
Well, Australia has brought back over 200,000 travelers, and thousands of them have had COVID-19. And while there have been breaches, it's been overall a fairly safe program and has really allowed people to come back while protecting the Australian communities. But no system is perfect, so there's always a potential for breaches. The current one, the theory goes, is because someone in a quarantine hotel used a nebulizer, which may create more aerosols than a typical inhaler or than just speaking or breathing, and that got out into the halls.
Just remind us what a nebulizer is.
So a nebulizer is something that someone uses, say, with asthma, and instead of using the inhaler, it's something that creates aerosols so that you can inhale a mist that includes the medication. But if you have COVID-19 and you get COVID-19 on the machine, then that is in the mist, and so that mist presumably got into the hall, infected other people in the quarantine hotel, as well as quarantine hotel workers. So that's currently the situation we're in.
As the UK impose this now, what lessons can be learned from Australia and New Zealand about how to do this in the most effective way?
Well, I think there are a lot of lessons, but the first thing I would ask is what exactly is the goal of this program? Because if the goal really is to keep out these new variants, then one has to wonder about the 33 countries on the list and the reason that the US isn't one of them. Because the US actually currently has 7 variants that have the worrisome mutation, similar to Brazil and to South Africa. So I would say that the US should be on the 34th country on your list. But some key things, and I think the most important thing is that COVID-19 is transmitted by the airborne route. It is transmitted by other routes as well. But if you don't protect against transmission with the airborne route, you are going to end up with hotel quarantine workers contracting COVID-19, as well as individuals in hotel quarantine that came in without COVID are going to leave with COVID because they're going to be infected in that hotel. So you really have to take care of the airborne nature. You have to ensure there's excellent ventilation within your hotel and that your workers are protected from the airborne transmission of the virus.
Also, just on sort of a human to human level, what do we know about the impact of the people who have to spend, 10 to 14 days by themselves? What can they do to try and best get through it and not have, any sort of mental health implications for spending so long by themselves?
Well, there definitely has been psychological suffering. And in Australia, they definitely have professionals that are available to help people. But it's a challenge. And I think people have to understand the challenge of going into the hotels and have to consider that when they're deciding whether international travel is worth it or not. Certainly, I think things like having windows that open and doors that open to balconies, it's really helpful for people's psychological well-being, and it's also helpful for the ventilation of the rooms. So I think going to a hotel with windows that don't open really is bad for a quarantine hotel, and hopefully those hotels haven't been chosen as quarantine hotels in this program.
Thank you very much for just giving us some more analysis. Professor Nancy Baxter, head of the Melbourne School of Population and Global Health at the University of Melbourne.